Hi, everybody. Jason here. Welcome to our Wednesday Instagram Live broadcast. I am incredibly excited for my guest this week. Is Elaine Brown, writer, graphic designer, really just cool person in the world of wine. And so I'm going to be inviting Elaine to join me in a couple of minutes. But first, as people join, I am going to show some pictures, as I always do, just give you a sense of what we're working on. So I took a tour yesterday of the new parcel that we call Jewel Ridge. This is a property that we bought in 2011. We didn't really need it, but or at least we knew we wouldn't need it for a few years, but it is an incredible property. It's contiguous with where we are. It's nice and high. It was a walnut orchard before. You can see one of the walnut trees that we left. But we've been spending the last decade getting the soil prepped. It's where we keep our animals in the summer when they can't be in the vineyard. And then just getting it ready to plant. It's all going to be head trained, dry farmed. It is a stunning site. You can see it's very steep. It's one of the owl boxes. We got a bunch of owl boxes over there. This is about a 30% slope. It is going up. There's different facings that go every direction. This is the top of that ridge. We've already planted some head-trained Mourvedre and Grenache vines there. Those are just planted last year. So we have a bunch more going in the ground this year, maybe 15 acres. We actually have, and it's super fun to see them there. We have some grapevines here that are all destined to Jewel Ridge. Jewel Ridge is named after one of our great old vineyard dogs who died at, I think, 17 or 18 years old and who's buried over there. But it is a stunning piece of property. A couple more views of it. And you can see super green, getting pretty out here. A close-up of one of the vines that we planted last year. And then as I was walking away, I got this nice picture of the moon rising over the ridge. A couple other things about that property. It has a lake that the former owner created by damming up Tablas Creek. We have visions in the long term of using that water to help frost protect. But for now, it is really just home for ducks and wetland habitat. And then finally, one last picture as I was heading back, like this classic pastoral shot looking up from the Tablas Creek bed, the West Tablas Creek bed towards our planted vineyard. You can see the vines sort of in that little silhouette. In the winery, we are bottling this week. So a quick shot of the bottling line. What are we bottling? Côte Tablas, Counoise, Grenache. And then we are getting all of our Wine Club shipment stuff prepped. We tasted all of the Wine Club shipment wines, and I posted a blog on that last week. So Wine Club members should be getting notes about it, and we're excited to get these wines to you. So that is what we got. I'm going to get rid of those pictures, and I'm going to invite Elaine to join me now. There she is. Sent the request. So this is going to be fun. I get to turn the tables on Elaine, who is one of the great interviewers in the world of wine and great moderators in the world of wine. Welcome, Elaine.
Thank you. So nice to see you.
It is lovely to see you.
I have to say, I had no idea that you could share photos like you just did through IG Live. I'm so impressed by your use of technology, but it's also just really good to see what you're doing.
We started doing this in March of last year when we realized people couldn't come and see us. And so, like, how do we share the experience of being here? And I've always hated the beginning of live events where we're like, okay, and like
waiting.
We're gonna start. We're just waiting for people to join. So this way I can use that time to give people a little tour, and if they miss some of it, whatever. They missed some of those pictures, but they haven't missed the meat of the event.
Well, you've inspired me. I need to look into how to just screen share photos at the beginning like you did. So
It's super easy. There's a little there's a little photo icon on the right that you click it, and then it opens up the last however many photos you have on your photo roll, and you can just scroll through and select the ones you want.
The other thing, just to embarrass you before we get started, since you're like, I'm going to turn the tables, well, ha ha. You've got the best voice for this sort of thing. You know, seriously, your voice, I was listening to you while you were talking through photos, and of course, I've long known I always enjoy talking to you. But this was like this chance for me to just watch and listen to you speak. And I was like, oh my God, it's just like you could have totally killed it on radio or voice, audio book recording. I don't know. You've got a great voice for this sort of thing. So
I was a radio DJ in college.
Aha!
So yeah, there you go. I guess this is all I've got left of that. But, thank you.
It's nice to bring all the things back together in new ways, Yeah,
for sure.
No.
All we need is like the sound mixer in the background so that I can actually filter in the right kind of music.
Yeah, there you go.
Cool. Okay, so I gave everybody just a tiny introduction to who you are at the beginning of this, but I would love to start by just asking you to talk a little bit about your sort of journey into the world of wine, because you didn't start out. This was not, I don't imagine, where you thought you were going to be going. I mean, certainly you've done all sorts of other cool stuff. I mean, from commercial salmon fishing to being a university professor to writing and drawing. And so how did wine become a part of your life?
Yeah, so I didn't grow up with wine at all. It's they're really, I mean, if you just think in terms of distribution, like good wine wasn't really going into Alaska where I grew up, until more recently. And so I was always aware that it was like one of these cultural things, like you should know, so like somewhere along the way, I picked up this idea that a classical education is key to having a really good foundation in just general thinking and being a holistic person and stuff like that. Right. And so somewhere in there, it was like clear that there's like this accent piece that's wine. That is like when you get to the really fleshing it all out part of the education process, wine becomes one of those things. But, like growing up, I have this vivid memory, even in mind right now, of being a very little kid and opening up a cupboard in the kitchen, and way, way, way up there at the top, there was one like rattan wrapped, bulbous shaped bottle. And I knew that was wine, and that was literally all I knew about it growing up. But then I went off to college, and I came back home one summer, and my dad, he's this sort of man that he's the head of the household, and his job is to make announcements. And so he sat us, I came home from school and we were all back together again, and he sat us down to make an announcement. And the announcement was that I have discovered Pinot Noir. And and I will be having a glass of wine a day from here on out. Like, you should know this. And it was this very serious moment, And he's like still completely in love with Pinot, especially. And it sort of was like this first moment where I was like, holy shit, this is like a thing, And
wait, so what era was this? When was this, like in connection to like the French paradox?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. To be honest, I think he just liked it, but he needed the good reason.
Yeah, sure.
For it to be okay. Yeah. So it was about the time, the French paradox was there were, 60 Minutes, I think. Didn't they even do a feature on it? That was a major moment in the adoption of wine in America. It's like all of a sudden Americans like got the okay from above that wine was something that they could include in their healthy lifestyle. Yeah. Yeah. And so then just like a year or two later, my good friend of mine, as a birthday present, gave me a really good bottle of Chianti as a present. And it was like some kind of Chianti Classico, but like, I didn't even know enough to know. I have no idea what the wine was now. But the thing was, that was the first time where I had it, and I was like, oh my God, this is good, But it took then a couple years after that. Then my sister took me out to dinner to thank me for helping her with something, And she's like, we should get a good bottle of wine. And she picked a Premier Cru Burgundy. And it was like the classic moment so many wine people have, right? Where, again, I'd had Chianti and I realized, oh, this is really good. And, and it's sort of funny that Chianti was that first wine, considering like what was up in the cupboard. But yeah, so I had, the sommelier poured the glasses of Premier Cru Burgundy, and I was the classic thing. I put my nose in the glass and I instantly got it. It was just like I had, it was this moment where I smelled the wine and it was this whole world, just in my nose. And I remember coming out of the glass and going, I had no idea. And that was like opened up the moment. But at that point I was on track to be an academic. And so wine, the problem with being a philosophy focused academic is that anything you call a hobby looks like a full-time profession to anyone else, So wine was this hobby because, you have to eat, you can have some wine. But it was like, seriously, like my poor friends, they'd be like, well, we're going to have dinner. And I'd be like, okay, great. Well, so I brought this, blah, 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 blah. It's from the region and and this is how it's made. And and I would like give them this huge discourse like it was a class or something. And then, so then fast forward a few years. And when I realized it was time to get out of academia, wine was the other thing I always had there. And I was finally starting to realize, oh, people work in wine. I wonder what that would be like. And I just bumbled my way along and turned it into what I do now,
That's super cool. So when you say what you do now, I mean, what you do now is a pretty wide range of different things. I mean, it encompasses writing for yourself and for multiple other outlets. It encompasses a lot of live work, like all of the things you did for the Wine Institute. And I'm sure that's just a piece of the live stuff that you're doing. But I remember the first time that I sort of became aware of your work was through some of the drawings that you were doing, like kind of the I think the explanation of biodynamic maybe was the first thing that I saw. How did that start?
Well, so the funny thing is drawing is actually how I got started in wine. So working, I mean. So when I gave myself a year to get out of academia gracefully, rather than just cut and run. I was like, okay, well, I'll give myself a year. But most of your work as an academic is like very future paced. You're planning future classes, you're researching potential books you might use down the road. Like you're serving on committees for initiatives that'll come out years down the road, And so because I was going to be leaving, the only work I had to do was my classroom work. And that's like 20 or 30% of your job as a faculty member. And so I had all this extra space in my head and all this extra time, and I needed something to fill that up. So I literally started researching wine. I I was an academic researcher, so I just treated it as a research subject, and I was like very seriously studying wine. And but I also knew that if I was leaving academia, I was going to have to like reset myself. And so in my mind, that meant I needed to come up with an activity that I did regularly that was entirely counter to what my life had been. And my life was fully verbal and intellectual. Like that was all I did. But drawing is neither of those things. And so I just started drawing. And then I very quickly realized that when I was drawing, it was like it was like yoga for my brain. Everything just relaxed and went quiet. And the really amazing epiphany was when I realized I actually was thinking, but there were no words. And the relief of that, it's like, I feel like that recognition, as odd as this might sound, has made me a better writer. Like learning how to just like make my brain go wordless and has given the space for thinking to occur in a different way. So that I've learned how to like let the thinking happen wordlessly, and then suddenly it'll like pop back out again and I'll know I'm ready to write. And so weirdly, drawing is gave me that. But the thing was, I got so into drawing because of this relaxing feeling that I started joking, I'm going to draw everything I ever do. Oh, walking to the store, drawing it as we go, And then, but the thing that I spent all my time doing was wine. So I started drawing tasting notes, and I started doing things like saying, what the heck is biodynamics? And like trying to figure out how do I draw it. And so it became like a way of thinking differently and communicating ideas that people found inaccessible.
Uh-huh.
And so I started drawing wine, and then it like hit. It just, my drawings went viral. And like within 3 weeks of doing the first one, it being put online, a friend of mine on Facebook was just using my drawings to advertise his wine shop. And within 3 weeks of the first one going online, Kermit Lynch Wine called them New Standard in Wine Reviews. Within a month and a half of the first one going online, Eric Asimov was recommending them in the New York Times.
Yeah.
In the first month, I was out of nowhere getting emails from France, from Australia, from China, from Argentina, asking if they could print them in magazines, all this stuff. And so that's how my wine career started. But at the time, it was disturbing to me, like that I could out of nowhere have this connections to people all over the world that I didn't know, and I didn't know why. It freaked me out. But that's literally how my wine career started, and the drawing turned into writing, which turned into speaking and education and seminars. So it's like become this whole like multi-sphere thing.
I mean, I think the drawings, they were genuinely new. They were like nothing that I had seen in the world of wine before. I can understand why so many people from so many different places would have looked at them and said, like, I want a piece of that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, so the first one, I did the first one in 2011, published in 2011, and that's not that long ago, but we have become so profoundly visual that we've gotten really used to seeing like iconography about wine and imagery, photographs that show pieces of, all these visual things about wine. But I actually had this is absurdly geeky again, but this historian of taste contacted me. He's like this long-standing researcher, and he contacted me, and he's like, can I interview you? This has never been done before. So like when I started drawing visual tasting notes of wine, and it turns out that had never been published before. So I like inadvertently created a new thing. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's it. That's part of why. So it just took off, because I think people had been looking for new ways to communicate wine and make it feel accessible. And that was one of the first modes of that, doing that visually, so.
Do you think of yourself as a visual learner?
No, not in the, I think we tend to talk about that as if you have one track of learning.
Right.
And what I've learned is like, I'm this very much like I guess you'd say a multimodal learner. Yeah. Like for me, it's actually, I learn by doing things. So like you and I have been, I've been lucky enough for you to make time to walk around vineyards with me. And, you were the first person that ever showed me exactly how grafting happens, and things like that. But, so we spent that time together. We did that. And even just the process of like walking the vineyard as we talk about it and you pointing out things to me, it's totally in my head now. Like we were actively involved in doing that. I very much learned that way. I can learn by books for sure, but there's a way in which I have to make it feel as if I'm physically engaged with the book learning. Right. So yeah, so I've like taught myself how to learn in lots of different ways. But the visual piece, to answer that, I definitely when I going to grad school of philosophy, I had to really transform how I used my own abilities. And so one of the things that kind of almost without realizing what I was doing at the time in grad school, I like realized I developed this mental process of I will like hyper listen to someone and I'll be like live mapping them in my head while I'm listening. And so in terms of what the mapping is, it's like I'm listening for like, what are the key ideas? What values are they expressing? How do the things link to each other?
Right.
And like, what's the most important? What's secondary? Which one makes it all work but isn't said? And then I'll be like mapping them in my head, and while I'm listening, and I'll listen for holes. I'm like, okay, okay, this part all holds up, but they haven't there's a missing piece here. They haven't explained, and so I'll start so I'll listen for a really long time before I start asking questions. And then and then when I do start asking questions, it's in response to what they've said, and I'll be like, oh, there's a missing piece here, and I'll start pushing towards the missing piece. And sometimes they don't know that it's missing.
Right.
Uh, but so anyway, it's an interesting process for me. I really like those one-on-one combos. The first ones I do with someone, it's usually really basic. I just want them to tell me what they're excited about, because that now I get a sense of them, and then as I get to know people more, I like start asking more and more questions, basically. So, but yeah, so there is a visual component where I'm kind of mapping, but I wouldn't say it's purely visual. The mapping is almost like a feeling visual combo, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I find myself doing a similar thing when I have to explain something to someone else. For me, it's almost sort of a teaching tool that it's not necessarily that I've absorbed information in that way, but it helps me make connections between information groups.
Yeah, totally.
If I think of it in sort of a visual organization. So I find often, like when I'm guest lecturing at a class, or if I'm presenting to a group, I'm often describing things in a way that is more visual, or using a whiteboard or a chalkboard to essentially group ideas and kind of draw transitions in a way that's visual. And I wonder if that's sort of a carryover from your time as an academic and your time teaching, because essentially that's really what a tasting note, or a complex wine concept, when you are describing it to someone else, you're essentially trying to teach them the idea that is clear in your head in a way that makes sense to them.
Yeah. I think most tasting notes fail to accomplish that.
Yeah, I totally agree.
But yeah, I think really kind of any communication, this is the thing, right? Like we try to get to know the material well enough, and so that we can like order it and deliver it in a clear way, And
yeah.
I mean, I think part of where this comes from for me too is I always saw teaching philosophy as teaching writing, like they're the same process actually. Because both are about ordering your thoughts and understanding material clearly. And so that was the thing I learned. It was okay to teach how to write effectively. You teach them to like, what are the key like what are the key terms? How do they connect to each other? Is one more important? Like you just like map it out, sort of.
Yep, totally. That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so talk about sort of what you've been doing over the last year in the pandemic. So much of kind of getting people organized behind screens to tell the stories that can't be told in person right now.
Yeah, it's been really interesting, because I feel like like you were in 2 different episodes of Behind the Wines, the series I did last year for the California Wine Institute, and it ended up.
Sorry, by the way, for people who don't know that, check out the California Wine Institute's YouTube page. This is an incredible series diving into the people and personalities and places of California that Elaine led last year. And it's, how many episodes are there?
32 episodes. We did it every week from the start of April till just before American Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it's just an amazing undertaking. So many cool stories told. I probably watched half of them and learned something from everyone. So if you're watching this and have not done it yet, go to the Wine Institute's YouTube page and check out that series. So, okay, sorry, go ahead.
No, thank you. So that was really interesting to do, because, what I did previous to the pandemic, I would and I still do this in another form now, but like essentially create custom seminars. So I do a lot of wine education or speaking or wine seminars, but the ones that I do are all custom to the topic. So that whole mapping thing I was describing, like I basically, somebody will contact me and they'll be like, oh, we're hoping you could help us explain sustainability more clearly or something like that. And so I'll spend a bunch of time interviewing the person about, okay, tell me what your goals actually are, da, da, da. And then I'll like dig into whoever speakers they want or experts in it, or, whatever the case at hand is. And I'll spend all this time like just getting the lay of the land. And then I'll step back and be like, okay, but the goal is to explain this concept. So here's the lay of the land. What's the easiest way to explain that concept really clearly in a way that opens up an insight into the bigger picture without having to cover all of it? So I used to do that in person, and I've been lucky enough to, like, I honestly have traveled all over the world doing that, and which in itself is cool. And like every time I go to a new country, it changes how I talk about wine, which I love. But then suddenly we're all, at home. And so the Wine Institute contacted me and asked if I would create just 4 seminars in the month of April. And this is like, I called you after this because it was so early in this whole going online thing that no one knew what it meant to do it. And so I spent a bunch of time asking them what they thought this was, and they kind of didn't know. And so I was like, oh my God, I can like get away with something here. And I decided, because it would be April, just 4 episodes in the month of April, I was like, well, April's Earth Month. And we want to share the best of California wine. And so I'm going to only do producers who are really focused on the land in a holistic sense, and like, and see the direct link to why that matters in terms of quality too. So it really is like the best of wine, but through farming and care for the environment and the community and things like that. So I did that in April, and it turned out we were getting like 500 viewers an episode, and live, and then like another several hundred in the recordings immediately after. And so they decided to continue, and we just kept every month. We didn't know if we'd do more. But the longer it went on, the more I felt like I could just expand what was relevant to the conversation. And the thing is, that process I described about just getting people to talk to me and me listening and trying to find out what they're doing, it means that I know a lot of really quirky behind the scenes stuff that no one would ever write about. It's not like a full article, but actually is super interesting to talk about. And especially if California has a PR problem. People think they know what it is. And parts of the world still think it's only what they imagine the 90s was. Right. And even that's that's the false picture too. Like it wasn't really that in the 90s,
right.
Even,
that's a piece of what the story was. That was
yeah,
not
exactly.
The whole story.
And so I was like, well, how do I give a really insightful, honest view of what California is, and yet show conversations that won't only be about California, that would be relevant anywhere for anyone interested in wine? And so I pulled a lot on, again, these like quirky backstories. We did a whole episode that was just Wink, Lork, and I, and we were linking, the like emerging trends in California that link to the French Alps and Jura. What the heck is that? That doesn't make any sense. But no, actually, if you're here on the ground really talking to people, there's this mini explosion of people planting these oddball varieties all over the state. Yeah. It really is that, and in 5 years or 10 years, those vines are all going to be online. And what on earth will that look like? And so it's like, we got to show the beginning of that conversation, and in 5 years we'll find out where it goes.
So before you started all of these, were you an expert in Zoom? Had you done virtual events before?
God, I don't know. I mean, the funny thing is people have been trying to get me on Zoom for like meetings for a few years. And this is horrible for me to admit publicly, but I was always like, oh, my video's not working. So I would join the Zoom audio only. I
Yeah.
would always call in, but because I was completely resistant to what we are doing right now. And I was totally resistant to it. And so no, I was not an expert in Zoom. I had avoided Zoom. I had avoided IG Live. And we just had to make it work. We just had to do it,
I mean,
you know.
I was the same way. Like I think the first Zoom thing that I ever did was that first episode that you invited me to be on that in April
In
for the Behind the
April,
Line.
yeah. But the
And
thing was, like, I was lucky enough to partner with Katie Canfield. The two of us like produced the whole series, and she was obviously behind the scenes. She would intro every series, and
right,
she would make these fantastic Google Maps and manage any kind of screen sharing stuff. But she was just the perfect collaboration partner, because I would come up with these ideas and I'd call her and I'd be like, is that too crazy? Like, you think we can do that? And then she would push me. There were some of the episodes she was like, you're not going far enough. You need to consider this, and she'd suggest a person be like, no way, we can't make that work. And then we would, so yeah, so a lot of kind of getting used to it and stuff. And I think the professionalism to be honest, I feel like we were able to bring to that series, it very much came from having a collaboration. It's just so much easier to do it with someone. And so I was scrambling every week because I was spending a lot of time on the phone, kind of interviewing and prepping the guests every week and sculpting the arc of conversation. And I knew, but she'll take care of the
right.
making maps and and scheduling and stuff like that.
So, having now been in this for a year, and I feel like we're starting to see the light at the other side. I mean, with vaccines getting out, with case numbers getting better, like where do you think things are going to settle? Like, to what extent do you think these virtual tools, these live virtual meeting spaces, are going to remain a piece of the post COVID, or at least like the post lockdown wine world?
They're absolutely going to stay. I think how they look is going to change. I think there will always be some like this casual sort of like friendly sort of thing like we see, like IG lives and people being able to make their own thing. I think that's a huge advantage that we've learned in the last year. Like, people can make their own thing. Like I very much created my own path in wine, and it was incredibly hard. And these tools did not exist, and so the advantage is people are realizing they can share their own stories, they can learn how to interview, they can hone their skills, like just by popping on IG Live. Clubhouse has emerged, which I again am totally resistant because
I haven't jumped in
I'm
there
like,
yet.
oh, no, another thing to learn, But that said, I'm fascinated by the idea that suddenly it's pivoting to audio only. Like, of course, podcasts have been around, but podcasts compared to Clubhouse are really formalized because you pre-record, you
Right.
edit to some extent, and then you release it, and people can listen anytime. Nobody listens live. Clubhouse is only live. So far, there's no way to listen later, But so anyway, I think online in various ways is absolutely here to stay. How it looks or sounds is going to totally evolve. I think there's it's kind of going in multiple directions. We're going to get far more of the casual, we do it ourselves stuff, like through Clubhouse, like through IG Live. And on the other side, the only way for like the really professional efforts to distinguish themselves are going to be to like go to a next level. And I don't mean like paid, but I mean like, companies or organizations, they're going to have to come up with ways to deliver content you really can't get through just the casual non-expert stuff, right? So there's like grassroots communication like we're doing now, and then there's going to be like next level professionalization where you use these platforms to really dig in and offer like higher level learning.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you certainly see the sorts of things that at least when I look at the many things that are offered out there, the sorts of things that I actually am like, I want to listen to that. Those are access things. It's basically like, who do they have talking, and are they talking about something that I'm interested in and that I can't get someplace else?
Yeah, exactly.
If all of those check boxes are checked, then it's like, I'm in, and that's not going to change, because it's difficult to get panels of experts together in the same location as an audience.
Yeah,
That's expensive, and
yeah.
it's hard, and it's not. I mean, it's going to be hard for a while. I don't think that things like international travel are going to leap back to where they were pre-COVID for a couple of years.
Well, so I mean, because like what you just got at, it's like the trick is how do you afford the time and the cost of getting the experts in one place, but also the audience that you want to impress with those experts.
Yeah.
That's too much. It's too much anymore. But you can do it online, and I think so. I think the downside of this increase of casual content is, I think it probably will actually erode further into the paid opportunities to deliver things. And that's why I'm saying we're going to see this increasing in the high level online content, where to distinguish, so if a company wants to make an impact and get a lot of coverage and change the conversation, they're going to have to really deliver quality material that you can't get anywhere else. And so the people that show up in the casual ways and show their expertise at communicating, they're going to be paid for these high level efforts. But I am kind of worried that over time it'll become harder for people to get paid, too. So that's, we saw that with print media. I think blogging is fantastic. It's not. Thankfully, people like you are still doing an amazing job with, like, really, like, one of the best wine blogs out there is yours at Tablas Creek. But the era of blogging, so to speak, we're kind of beyond that, and the truth is the era of blogging coincided with the decrease of paid print media. And I don't mean the one caused the other, but I'm saying that there's a correlation.
Right.
And I'm worried about that with online stuff too.
Right. When there's an abundance of content that's out there for free, it raises the bar for things that people are going to pay for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Cool. I had like 10 other questions I wanted to ask you, but we're already half an hour in. So I think I do want to keep this to a half an hour. So I would love you to tell people, like, where, if they want to follow you, if they want to read the content that you're producing, written, drawn, spoken, however it is, how do people find you and follow you and read you?
Yeah. So unfortunately, I've been really bad. I haven't updated my own blog in about a year, which is ridiculous because it would have made it easier for everybody to find all my stuff. So I need to go like retroactively update it. But it's actually, I have such weird names that it's really easy to find me. So if you just search Hawk Waka Waka, you find quite a bit of stuff. But a lot of the more professional side of work I do is weirdly no longer associated with the name Hawk Waka Waka. So it's, if you search Elaine Chukan Brown, no one else has the name Chukan, Chukan. So if you search Elaine Chukan Brown, then you'll find a lot. You'll find a lot of stuff. But yeah, if you go to YouTube and search Elaine Chukan Brown, you'll definitely find the California Wine series that, behind the wines that you did with me. And then there's lots of other random things seminars that have been recorded and put there as well.
And then, of course, like your work for Jancis Robinson.
Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm the American specialist for Jancis. And so if you just go to jancisrobinson.com, then I have writing there. And then, a lot of what I do actually is very much behind the scenes. And so it's not associated with my name, so right. Some of that's obvious. Like I helped update the World Atlas and the Oxford Companion, and that's just like fits into the books. But then a lot of other stuff, I'm like helping with community efforts behind the scenes. And so like my You can't search and find me by name with those stuff, but that's okay because it's good for everybody anyway. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, time to update your blog.
Yes, I need to do it. Okay, I promise. I'm going to promise you right now, before the end of March, I will update my blog and put all the stuff on there. How about that?
Awesome. It's not
Okay.
for me.
I know.
It's for all of the audience on here.
Thanks. I'm saying it now because then I will do it.
Right. That's the same thing. If you say it out loud, it makes it real.
Yeah. So
cool. Awesome. Elaine, thank you so much for taking some time this afternoon to join me. I know I always look for and really enjoy when the content that you produce. I hope that some new people who didn't already know that they would get excited about this have gotten excited about this. But meanwhile, I look forward to seeing you on screen and hopefully before too long in person.
I know. I'm looking forward to it. It's great that you're sharing photos of your property there because it really is such a beautiful place and the work you're doing is so important. And I hope everybody will really look to your blog, the Tablas Creek blog, and especially look up what you're doing in terms of regenerative farming and thinking about more like holistic efforts on conservation and sustainability. I think it's really important. And the truth is you're really helping to set the bar on that in wine. So thank you for that.
Thanks. I hope so.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, again,
nice
thanks
to see
everybody who joined. Thank you so much, Elaine. And if you are a regular watcher of this, I'll be back in 2 weeks. I'll have Hardy Wallace as my guest from Dirty and Rowdy Wine, and he has a really fun and interesting journey into the world of wine as well. So, again, thank you, Elaine. Thank you, everybody, and I'll see you all in 2 weeks.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, too.